Good evening. We are continuing our study of the Letters of Swami Vivekananda, the new edition in 4 volumes, and we'll start with our opening prayer. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitam astu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. May we be protected together. May we be nourished together. May we acquire strength together. May our learning shine forth in our lives. May we not find fault with one another. Om, peace, peace, peace. So may what we learn shine forth in our lives tonight as we study these letters. And tonight we are going to take up the first letter Swami Vivekananda wrote from America. And actually, it took him a while to get around to writing a letter, at least one that we still have. He made it all the way to Massachusetts, and he was staying with Miss Kate Sanborn in Breezy Meadows, Metcalfe, Massachusetts. And that's where we have the first letter from America. Let's just review his journey for a moment. He left India, Bombay, now Mumbai. Karima? It's all still in volume 1. We're still in volume 1. This is, it's about maybe a fifth of the way into the book. It's still early on in the book. 31st May 1893, Swamiji leaves Bombay, and he reaches Colombo on 3 days later, on the 3rd of June, Colombo, Sri Lanka. Stays there for just a half a day, and then goes on to Malaysia and lands in Singapore on June 8th. And June 9th, he departs for Hong Kong. He's there from June 13 to 16, and then goes inland to Guangzhou, in those days called Canton. And on the 24th June, he leaves Hong Kong, reaches Japan, Nagasaki, all the way in the south, and he's there for a few hours, and then reaches Kobe on the 30th of June. And then from Kobe, he goes to Yokohama by land, going through a number of the cities in Japan. And he writes a letter, his first letter from outside India is from July 10. We did that in our second class. And he left Yokohama on the 14th of July, and he reached Vancouver on the 25th of July. And from July 28, it looks like he spent a couple of days in Vancouver. And on the 28th of July, he took the train to Chicago, reaching Winnipeg on the 30th, and August 1st, St. Paul, Minnesota, and in the evening, reaching Chicago. So that was the journey. I was just looking at the map before class. The train, the Great Northern Railway, crossed the Canadian border with the United States at a little town called Gretna, Canada, which currently has a population of something like 550 people. And the train, the train line, that rail line, closed in the 1920s. But on the satellite pictures, you can still see where it was. It's amazing. You can still see through the farmlands. You can see this mark that the only thing it could be is the train line. And it crosses from Canada to America in right around that town of Gretna. So that's his thrilling journey. So now we're going to read this letter number 76, written to Sri Alasinga Perumal. And he starts the letter again as, Dear Alahya Singha. And we had some online discussion, and also I discussed with Vijay, our resident Tamilian, about the name, why Swamiji is calling him Alahya, which means beautiful, beautiful lion, Alahya Singha. But Alasingha is kind of perhaps a corruption of that. It doesn't really mean much of anything in Tamil, apparently, but it probably derived from this Alahya Singha, and Swamiji was calling him by that, addressing him by that in these early letters. Received your letter yesterday. Okay, that means how did he receive a letter from him in America if he hadn't been in America yet? Probably he was registered with Cook's. Yeah, write to me care of Cook and Sons, Chicago. So his Japan letter was, in his letter from Japan, he asks Alasingha to write to him care of Cook and Sons, Chicago. And Cook and Sons would have then forwarded it to him wherever he was. So he would have left word with Cook and Sons. Perhaps you have by this time got my letter from Japan. From Japan, I reached Vancouver. The way was by the northern Pacific. It was very cold, and I suffered much for want of warm clothing. However, I reached Vancouver anyhow, and thence through Canada to Chicago. Remained about 12 days in Chicago, and almost every day I used to go to the fair. That is the World's Fair, of course, which went from 1st of May through 31st of October, 1893. It is a tremendous affair. One must take at least 10 days to go through it. The lady to whom Varada Rao introduced me and her husband belonged to the highest Chicago society, and they were so very kind to me. So apparently, Varada Rao was a noted civil servant, lawyer, and member of the Triple Cane Literary Society of Madras. So he introduced Swamiji to Americans of Chicago, and a footnote says that Swamiji possibly stayed as their guest for a few days before shifting to Massachusetts. They were at 1703 Indiana Avenue. So that couple was Mrs. Anna Wilder Phelps and Mr. Erskine Mason Phelps. So Mr. and Mrs. Phelps, Swamiji stayed with them, most likely, it seems. But then he goes on to say, but here they want to make much of foreigners, just for a fun, no further. When it comes to their pocket, they all almost step back. And this is such a bad year here, commercial failures everywhere. There's a footnote, there was a panic. It was called the Panic of 1893. And this is, if you look back over American history, it wasn't just I mean, in my lifetime, there have been several of these. There was the savings and loan crisis. There was the crash when just before Obama became president, as I recall. And so, well, this is a tradition in American economics, because there was a panic of 1893, which no one remembers now, a severe economic crisis lasting from 1893 to 1897, and it was triggered by the collapse of financial institutions and the stock market panic of May 1893, affecting all sectors of the economy, causing high unemployment rates, and the crisis led to political upheaval, economic reforms, and the presidency of William McKinley. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? They say history repeats itself. So I took my departure from Chicago forthwith and came to Boston. Mr. Lalubhai was with me up to Boston. He was very kind to me. He is not what his sons paint him to be. He is a very good man at heart, but he is a banya and very strict in money matters. Banya means he's a businessman. And so he was traveling with a fellow Indian in America up to Boston. So he saw the Parliament of Religion, he saw the World's Fair, and there's going to be a description in this book a little later about the World's Fair, how many. It's a huge affair. And so he stayed there about 12 days, and then running out of money, and the Parliament of Religions isn't until September. This is, he reached there what did I say? He reached in Chicago on August 1st. So the Parliament didn't start till September 11th. So he went to Massachusetts to kill some time, apparently, getting an invitation from this Kate Sanborn, whom he had met on the train from Vancouver. The expenses I am bound to run here is awful. You remember you gave me £170 in notes and £9 in cash. It has come down to £130 in all. On an average, it costs me £1 every day. A cigar costs 8 annas of our money, and the Americans are so rich that means half a rupee. And the Americans are so rich that they spend money like water, and by forced legislation, they keep up the price of everything so high as no other nation on earth can approach it. Every common coolie earns 9 or 10 rupees a day and spends it. All those rosy ideas we had before starting have melted, and I have now to fight against impossibilities. 100 times I had a mind to go out of the country and go back, but then I think I am a determined devil, and I have a call from above. I see no way, but his eyes see, and I must stick to my guns, life or death. We'll see that when Swamiji was getting his work established in America, he admits later that sometimes his faith would waver a little bit, and he would seek for human help. But ultimately, he always relied on the divine, and he had this direct connection. So this is beautiful. I see no way, but his eyes see. And so he knew that he had that divine call. And later we find that he's admitting that he's getting the direct guidance of Sri Ramakrishna for everything that he does. So I'm guessing that maybe he didn't have it from the beginning, that he developed that more, that started coming more, or maybe he started trusting it more, or that channel was opened a little bit later, because at the beginning everything was so new and frightening that perhaps he wasn't feeling like he was getting that daily contact, that daily guidance. And there's a footnote here about Miss Sanborn. Miss Catherine Abbott Sanborn, 1839 to 1917. So she was 24 years older than Swamiji. So from his standpoint, elderly lady. If he was 30 at that time, she would have been 54. She was an American writer. Swamiji had met her in the observation car of the Canadian Pacific Railway's Atlantic Express on his way from Vancouver to Chicago, and spent about 9 days at Breezy Meadows. Miss Sanborn introduced Swamiji to many influential people, particularly Dr. John Henry Wright, professor of Greek at Harvard University, who played a crucial role in enabling Swamiji to be a delegate at the Parliament of Religions. As we know, Swamiji didn't have any documentation explaining that he is a bona fide Hindu and can properly represent Hinduism at the Parliament of Religions. How is he going to be a delegate at the Parliament without documentation? So Professor Wright wrote a letter to the organizers of the Parliament saying, first he told Swamiji, asking you for credentials is like asking the sun for credentials to shine. So he wrote a very strong letter in favor of Swamiji to Dr. Barrows, the organizer of the Parliament, and Swamiji became a delegate. So we see how all these pieces fall into place. The pieces of the puzzle fall into place, even though Swamiji doesn't know how it's happening. He meets Kate Sanborn on the train. He goes to Chicago. He's running out of money. It's still a month to wait. He goes to see Kate Sanborn. And plus, he doesn't have any documentation, any credentials. He goes to visit Kate Sanborn. She introduces him to Professor Wright, who writes the letter for him to get to, so it all falls into place. It's beautiful. Your kind warnings about the Theosophists is, I'm reading, the letters have been exactly printed as written. So there are grammatical errors. Swamiji is writing quickly from Breezy Meadows, so here and there's a little grammatical errors. Your kind warnings about the Theosophists is, I think, childish. They are almost an unknown quantity here in this land of bigoted Christianity. I have not seen any Theosophist yet, and once or twice I have heard them mentioned with only the greatest contempt. The Americans believe them to be cheats. Just now I am living as a guest with an old lady, Miss Kate Sanborn. Nowadays we wouldn't think of 54 years old as exactly an old lady, would we? We hope not, because probably many of us in this room are, well, at least some of us, half of us are well over 54. And we don't think of ourselves as old yet. But anyhow, in those days, she was an old lady in a village near Boston. I accidentally made her acquaintance on board the railway train, and she invited me to come over and live with her. I have my advantage in living with her in saving, for some time, in saving money, my £1 per day expenditure. And she has the advantage of inviting her friends over here and showing them a curio from India, 3 exclamation marks. All this botheration must be borne. Starvation, cold, hooting in the streets for my quaint dress. These are what I have to fight through. But, my dear boy, no great things were ever done without great labor. Imagine, he's walking in the streets and people hooting after him because of his dress. And there he is in a completely foreign country. What boldness was required for him to do this? And starvation, sometimes not getting food, not knowing where to get food. Who knows why starvation? He had money, but maybe he didn't want to spend the money. He didn't already. With £1 a day is going. He's getting worried. How is he going to stay here? A cousin of my lady friend, that is Mr. Franklin B. Sanborn, is a cousin of Kate Sanborn, who is coming today to see me, writes to her that a real Hindu devotee is an interesting study, but I am too old to be cheated by the esoteric Buddhists, 3 exclamation marks. This is the influence of theosophy and their regard for it. Mohini Chatterjee had once a great influence over a very rich lady in Boston, but he, of all others, has spoiled the job, and that lady is now the worst opponent of esoteric Buddhism and things of that ilk. Now, who's Mohini Chatterjee? He was a member of the Theosophical Society and also of the Brahmo Samaj in Calcutta. So he came to Boston, apparently, and turned the Bostonians against theosophy. Know then that this is the land of Christians, and any other influence than that is almost zero, nor do I care a bit for the enmity of any fists, quote unquote, P-H-I-S-T-S, in the world, theosophists or anything else. Of course, we do know how the Transcendentalists really paved the way for Swamiji, Emerson and Thoreau, and their study of the Gita, and that kind of thing. But still, Christianity, it was and still is, to a great extent, the land of Christians. I spent a couple of weeks in the Bible Belt, as you know, a week in Tennessee, where there's churches everywhere. And there's so many different denominations, a lot of different Baptist denominations and others. And some of the signs outside the churches, they change the sign every week. There was one a few years ago we saw, it was nice. It was really hot summer that time. That year it was really hot in Tennessee. And the sign said, if you think it's hot here, ... So they still preach that fire and brimstone, the hellfire that if you mess up. So here, but now he gets beautiful. He says, I am here amongst the children of the Son of Mary, and Lord Jesus would help me. One thing I have found out, they like much my broad views of Hinduism and my love for the Prophet of Nazareth. I tell them that I preach nothing against the Great One of Galilee, only ask the Christians to take in the great ones of India along with Lord Jesus, and they appreciate it. So far is done. Now that I am being talked about and advertised, that is the only way here. That requires a length of time and money. Just now winter is approaching, and I would have to get all sorts of warm clothing, and we require more warm clothing than natives. Okay, obviously, coming from India, where the climate is very warm, you would need more warm clothing. It's fascinating to read this early letter where he doesn't know what's happened, what's going to unfold. Everything is still a big question mark, but with this faith that he is among the children of the Son of Mary, and Lord Jesus will help him. That's beautiful. And advertising, of course, yes, he had the newspaper articles, and afterwards it became a big thing, and then it was too much, he couldn't take it anymore. But of course, money did come, both donations, and he used to earn money sometimes by giving lectures. So he's going to encourage Alasinga again. Look sharp, my boy, take courage. We are destined by the Lord to do great things in India. Have faith. We will do. We, the poor and the despised, who really feel, and not those brute beasts they call rajas, etc. Okay, that was a little bit harsh. The rajas, who are basically the big landlords, the little, India was covered with little kingdoms. And of course, the rajas, basically, they collected the rents off of the tenants who were poor agriculturalists, and they lived in the lap of luxury. The rajas, you can still see some of those palaces in India with the golden thrones, literally thrones made of gold and all that stuff. It's beautiful to see those, and then you realize that those golden thrones were paid for with the blood and sweat of the poor farmers of the little kingdoms there. So he has this tremendous faith. We are destined to do great things in India. Destined. We, the poor and the despised. So all along there's that knowledge of his calling. In Chicago there was a great fun here. The Raja of Kapurthala was here, and he was being lionized by some portion of Chicago society. I once met this Raja on the fairgrounds, but he was too big to speak with a poor fakir. So Swamiji, the Raja wouldn't speak to Swamiji, considering him as a beggar monk. Wait, there was an eccentric Maratha Brahmin selling nail-made pictures in the fair, dressed in a dhoti. Now, what is a nail-made picture? Is it with your fingernail or anyhow, he was selling something. Maybe he would paint things with his fingernails and sell these pictures at the Parliament of Religion, not the Parliament, the World's Fair. And he's dressed in a dhoti, so he's dressed in the traditional dress. This fellow told the reporters all sorts of things against the Raja, that he was a man of very low caste, that these Rajas were nothing but slaves to the British, I guess, that they were immoral beasts, etc., etc. And these truthful editors, in parentheses, exclamation mark, he's being sarcastic, for which America is famous, wanted to give to the boys' stories some weight. And so the next day, they wrote huge columns in their papers about the description of a man of wisdom from India, that is me, extolling me to the skies and putting all sorts of words in my mouth, which I never dreamt even, and in the end, putting all those remarks about the Raja of Kapurthala that they had heard from the Maratha Brahmin in my mouth. So this is the gossip papers of 1893, putting in Swamiji's mouth the words of an artist trying to make a little money at the World's Fair, putting those words in his mouth. And it was such a good brushing that Chicago society gave up the Raja in hot haste. I was not sorry. He deserved it. But the liars of newspaper editors made capital out of me to give my countryman, however bad he be, a brushing. That shows also that in this country, intellect carries more weight than all the pomp of money and title. So he feels, obviously, he feels a little conflicted. On the one hand, the Raja deserved it. He was a jerk. But on the other hand, he was his fellow countryman, after all. Now he had an experience visiting a prison in Massachusetts. Yesterday, Mrs. Johnson, the lady superintendent of the women's prison, was here. There's a footnote. On 22nd August, he's writing, remember, on the 20th August. Oh, he went back to that prison. Or he went to the prison on the 22nd. He addressed the inmates of the Sherborne State Reformatory for Women, Massachusetts, in the chapel on manners, customs, and mode of living in India. So this would have been one of his first talks, sort of group talks in India, to women inmates of the prison, then called a reformatory, and it's too bad it's gone back to, well, let's call it correctional institution sometimes, but let's face it, we know they're prisons. And apparently at that time, they had some open mind about it. It is the grandest thing I have seen in America, how they are benevolently treated, how they are reformed and sent back as useful members of society. How grand, how beautiful. You must see to believe. Still, we have that ideal, but in practice, prisons are just for punishment, actually, at this point. So Swamiji really appreciated that. And then now he's going on, and oh, how my heart ached to think of what we think of the poor, the low in India. They have no chance, no escape, no way to climb up. The poor, the low, the sinner in India have no friends, no help. He cannot rise, try however he can. They sink lower and lower every day. They feel the blows showering upon them by a monstrous, cruel, brutal society, and they do not know whence the blow comes. They have forgotten that they too are men, and the result is slavery and bestiality. Thoughtful people within the last few years have seen it, but unfortunately, they laid it at the door of the Hindu religion, and to them, the only way of bettering is by crushing this grandest religion of the world. Swamiji used to say that India had chains on put chains on society, but given religion all freedom. And so the religion of India had developed into the grandest thing, but society was constricted, was terrible, was exploitative. And whereas the West gave a lot of freedom in society, but religion was extremely narrow. And so religion didn't develop to that extent in the West. However, society developed. So he wanted to see the free and open society of the West in India and the breaking of the chains on religion in the West. So we see that it's happening to a certain extent, of course. Hear me, my friend. I have discovered the secret through the grace of the Lord. Religion is not at fault. On the other hand, your religion teaches you that every being is only your own self multiplied. But it was the want of practical application, the want of sympathy, the want of heart. And of course, this system of caste, which is still there in India, although much reduced, it's really terrible. And we find in Hindu scriptures some support for the institution of caste, but what always shows me that proves that it's a social institution, not a religious institution, is that Hindus who convert to other religions like Christianity and Islam, they still hold on to their caste. And they still have this caste, they still make this caste distinctions. They've changed their religion, but not their caste. So clearly it's like certain very horrible institutions in America taking the help of religion to, like exterminating the Native Americans. Well, it's manifest destiny. The great religion, the great tradition of the West is there to convert and raise the lowly natives. And if they don't agree, then it's perfectly all right to kill them. There's nothing to do with Christianity proper, real Christianity, but taking the help. So that's the same kind of thing with the exploitative traditions of India of those times. The Lord once more came to you as Buddha, and taught you how to feel, how to sympathize with the poor, the miserable, the sinner, but you heard him not. Your priests invented the horrible story that the Lord was here for deluding demons with false doctrines. 3 exclamation marks. There's this theory that Buddha came to spread the false doctrine of shunyata, emptiness, to delude the demons or something. True indeed, but we are the demons, not those that believed. Okay, now here's a sentence which now I think we will say is not in accordance with our current understanding. He says, and just as the Jews denied the Lord Jesus and are since that day traveling over the world homeless, beggars, tyrannized over by everybody, so you are bond slaves to any nation that thinks it worthwhile to rule over you. Now, of course, this was really like a Christian trope, an anti-Jewish trope that, you Jews, you denied Jesus, and so look at you now. That's why, because you denied Jesus. Of course, the Jews were able to establish their country, Israel, and but Swamiji would have had, up until then, he had no contact at all with Jews. He had contact with some Christians by now, and of course later he made many friends among Christian clergy, and also had some good rabbi friends. So he would have, I would imagine that his ideas would have evolved about this. But he's likening it to the Hindus who didn't listen to Buddha's message of compassion, and so bringing India to its current state of degradation, or its current means of that time. Ah, tyrants, you do not know that the obverse is tyranny and the reverse slavery. The slave and the tyrant are synonyms. He's going on. Balaji and Gigi, two of his correspondents. Though he's addressing this to Alasinga, it really means Alasinga and all the Madras devotees, because naturally Alasinga would have shared the letter. Balaji and Gigi, referring to Gigi Narasinghacharya, a cousin of Alasinga Perumal and one of his first devotees. Remember one evening at Pondicherry, we were discussing the matter of sea voyage with a pundit, and I would always carry with me his brutal gestures and his kadapi na, which means never. As in, you can't do a sea voyage, you'll lose your caste, you'll lose everything. How can you do a sea voyage? Everything we need is here in India, and everything is fine, and no growth, no nothing. So Swamiji's remembering these brutal gestures and kadapi na when they're discussing, never can it be, the Sanskrit, of course, kadapi na. Fools, they do not know what is what. They do not know that India is a very small part of the world, and the whole world looks down with contempt upon the 300 millions of earthworms crawling upon the fair soil of India and trying to oppress each other. This state of things must be removed, not by destroying religion, but by following the great teachings of Hindu faith and joining with it the wonderful sympathy of that logical development of Hinduism, Buddhism. 100,000 men and women fired with the zeal of holiness, fortified with eternal faith in the Lord, and nerved to lion's courage by their sympathy for the poor and the fallen and the downtrodden, will go over the length and breadth of the land, preaching the gospel of salvation, the gospel of help, the gospel of social raising up, the gospel of equality. Swamiji had this vision already from the beginning. It's interesting to see these two strands together in his letter. On the one hand, as far as the externals, how is this going to play out? How am I going to deliver my message here? How am I going to work in India? I don't know. And things are really tough. It's cold here and it costs a lot of money. I don't have much. But then when he starts remembering the message he has this call to bring this message to every door in India. And it happened. Vivekananda is taught in every elementary school in India. So he knew that it was going to happen. And this message, 100,000 men and women fired with a zeal of holiness, fortified with eternal faith in the Lord. Look at that, zeal of holiness. So actually, he's calling on all of us who are followers of Vivekananda, who are devoted to Vivekananda, to fire ourselves up with a zeal of holiness and fortified with eternal faith in the Lord, Shraddha, that's tremendously strength-giving, and nerved to lion's courage. So it takes a lion's courage to do this work. What is bringing that courage within? That lion's courage? Sympathy for the poor and the fallen and the downtrodden. And such, fired up with the zeal of holiness, fortified through faith, and nerved to lion's courage by sympathy, will go over the length and breadth of the land, preaching the gospel of salvation, the gospel of help, the gospel of social raising up, and the gospel of equality. How beautiful. And then he because all the teachings, these teachings are within the Sanatana Dharma, within Hinduism, within the Vedanta, that the poor are God himself, God herself, suffering before us. So he says, no religion on earth preaches the dignity of humanity in such a lofty strain as Hinduism. And then he laments. And no religion on earth treads upon the necks of the poor and the low in such a diabolic fashion as Hinduism. So, both sides. The Lord has shown me that religion is not at fault, but it is the Pharisees and Sadducees in Hinduism, hypocrites who invent all sorts of devilish engines of tyranny in the shape of doctrines of paramarthik and vyavaharik. Okay, we'll get into that. First, the Pharisees and Sadducees were two prominent Jewish sects during the Second Temple period, and I think I need someone with more Christian background to explain exactly what was the problem with the Pharisees and the Sadducees. They were really observing the letter of the law, but not.
Yeah, and if I remember, Pharisees were the maintainers of the actual law of
Moses, law of Moses, or.
Yeah. So, but I think the lower priest caste were, depending upon the areas in which they were stationed, especially in Israel and near Rome, would often really hewn to the ideas and the thought processes of the local people. So,
Do you have the microphone? I can.
fighting between the Pharisees and we're trying to maintain the law, usually in connection to how Rome would. Usually in connection to the way that Rome would put forth the law, because they obviously needed to maintain order. And
what about the specifically? What about the in the context of the Christians? Because that's what Swamiji would have been known about. You know, Jesus and the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And so they were part of the Jewish temple.
Yeah, because and Jesus came out of the Jewish tradition. Not really. I mean, the whole idea of Christianity came, long after his crucifixion.
What Swamiji says here is, the Lord has shown me that religion is not at fault, but it is the Pharisees and Sadducees in Hinduism, hypocrites. So apparently there was an idea, at least at that time, that the Pharisees and Sadducees were hypocrites.
And there's probably an equaling of the idea. I mean, often because of the Pharisees' very political leaning ways of putting forth moral law throughout the Jewish settlements that were surrounding Rome, they would consider them to be, politically and a bit duplicitous.
So let's go on, but we'll do some little research and find out.
People would say there's a lot of hypocrisy there, I would say.
Okay, yeah. So.
I don't know those, but is he equating them to the Brahmins and what the Brahmins were doing in Hinduism?
Well, he said that the higher castes who are just putting their feet on the necks of the poor and the downtrodden. So, right, played against the Brahmins, right. So, who invent all sorts of devilish engines of tyranny in the shape of doctrines of paramarthik and vyavaharik. And the idea that the doctrine, the paramarthika satya that's the highest reality, that is Brahman. But in the vyavaharika reality, then that has a conditional reality, and he's surely referring to then from vyavaharik on the vyavaharika basis on the conditional reality. Although you say that ultimately it's unreal, but still, when you call it conditionally real, then you have all these horrible doctrines of caste and don't touchism and all that kind of thing. So he's referring to that. Despair not. Comes back. Despair not. As bad as it gets, despair not. Remember, the Lord says, to work you have the right, but not to the result in Gita. Who can quote it for me? Come on, you Gita students. Karma, starts with karma. Karmanyevadhikare. Karmanyevadhikarastu. Napadeshu kadachana, but never to the fruits. To work, you have the right, but not to the result in the Gita. Here's the whole verse. Karmanyevadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karma phalahetur bhurmate sangostva karmani. Be also, even though you don't have the right to the results of work, don't hanker after that, but also don't be attached to inaction. Don't just lie around as a lazy bum because I have no right to the fruit, so why should I work? So Sri Krishna right away says, you have right to work, you have the right, not to the fruits, but also you have to work. So, gird your waists, boy. I am called by the Lord for this. I have been dragged through a whole life full of crosses and tortures. I have seen the dearest and nearest die almost of starvation. I have been ridiculed, distrusted, called a humbug and a rogue, and many in Madras still think that I am so, and suffered all this for my sympathy with the very men who scoff and scorn. Well, my boy, this is the school of misery, which is also the school for great souls and prophets, for the cultivation of sympathy, of patience, and above all, of an indomitable iron will, which quakes not even if the universe be pulverized at our feet. Amazing how this comes out at this early date. This is before the parliament, remember. He's not yet on the world stage, and yet he has this tremendous power within him that's just ready to burst on the world. And it has been said, probably you've read that why most of the great prophets, the great world teachers, are born in difficult situations. Why? It's precisely so that they understand what it is to be poor, to be downtrodden, So Krishna was born in a prison. The Lord has come again with the same message of the divinity of humanity and to uplift the poor, the suffering, the miserable, especially those in India and everywhere, as if the comments and questions?
When did you return?
Returned to India?
To India.
1897.
Is that when you started When he returned to India the first time, was that when he started the youth organizations, or?
Well, we started the Ramakrishna Mission,
Okay,
which
yeah.
was the formal organization dedicated to the this uplift work, educational work, medical work.
But he did a lot of touring around India at that point
At that
to
time,
actually
he also
uplift.
went everywhere spreading the teachings of Vedanta, teaching these lectures from Colombo to Almora, taught Vedanta, but this practical Vedanta, that to serve,
Right.
to serve others, see the divine in all beings and serve them.
Right. So was the Brahmo Samaj still active at that point, or no?
Brahma Samaj, of course, Brahma Samaj was restricted to mostly to Bengal and Bengalis in other parts of India.
Okay.
And
He toured India before also, before coming to.
right, before India, he toured and saw the condition of the masses, but then he wasn't a world figure. He was an unknown monk, changing his name.
Actually, that's when he suffered a lot because he was
Right.
walking through villages that nobody knew, begging.
Right, and there he saw the tremendous poverty also. Of course, he would say one night he'd be in the poorest of humble cottages, and a few days later he'd be the guest of a Raja. Because the Rajas also, they were educated, they recognized his tremendous intellect and his tremendous, and so he did actually have some disciples among those also. Particularly, of course, is the Raja of Khetri, who became his ardent disciple and supporter, and funded his passage to the West. Yes, funded his passage to America. So